Spartans, whose name has become synonymous with unwavering strength, were warriors of whom immortal legends were forged. How did this small city-state transform into an unquestionable symbol of iron discipline, unparalleled bravery, and absolute independence? The price they paid for this greatness is truly unimaginable and capable of astonishing anyone who dares to glimpse into their world. One must delve into this harsh reality, where the slightest weakness was utterly unacceptable, to comprehend why Sparta still evokes profound admiration today. How did these stern people live? How did they prepare for their legendary battles? And why did the specter of dishonor terrify them far more than their most formidable enemies? All these mysteries will be unveiled in their astonishing history. Those familiar with the cinematic work, 300 Spartans, might be surprised by how truthful the film turned out to be. While it certainly contains artistic exaggerations and dramatic liberties, a striking portion of its narrative is rooted in grim reality. First and foremost, as the great historian Plutarch testified, boys were indeed taken from their mothers at the tender age of 7. They were placed in a specialized survival school known as the Agoge, where they underwent relentless training. Within this system, Spartan youths were raised in conditions that closely mimicked brutal military reality. They were mercilessly beaten, often to the point of unconsciousness, starved, forced to sleep on cold, hard ground without proper clothing, and expertly taught the use of sword and spear. For 13 long years, until they reached the age of 20, these future warriors endured piercing cold, agonizing hunger, and incessant beatings. This was a test at the limits of human endurance, and sadly, not every one of them survived to successfully complete this rigorous training. The Agoge system, unique for its time, forged Spartan boys into fearless, impeccably disciplined, and exceptionally physically prepared men whose lives were entirely dedicated to serving the state. However, this harsh upbringing almost entirely suppressed personal ambition or individuality, completely subordinating each Spartan's existence to the supreme interests of the polis. In stark contrast to the status of women in other Hellenic city-states, Spartan women enjoyed unprecedented rights. They possessed a significantly greater degree of freedom, had the right to own land, actively participated in athletic competitions, and instilled deep patriotic sentiments in the younger generation. Furthermore, they were even taught the basics of self-defense, an exceptional practice for the era. Spartan men were only permitted to marry upon reaching 20 years of age, but cohabitation with their wives only began after the age of 30, upon completion of their full military training. This arrangement ensured that all their strength and thoughts were directed solely towards serving the interests of the polis. Spartan men served in the military until the age of 60, even when their physical capabilities no longer allowed them to participate in direct combat. Experienced, older warriors contributed by developing strategic plans or training the younger generation. Notably, marital unions in Sparta were not based on ardent romantic attachments. The primary and essentially sole purpose of such unions was the production of healthy and robust offspring. The marriage customs of ancient Sparta were exceptionally distinctive. Before entering into marriage, the prospective bride had to shave her head and dress in men's clothing. This ritual symbolized a significant transition from maidenhood to maturity, and readiness for a new role in society. The groom, in turn, was expected to abduct his bride, though this act always occurred with the full consent of the woman. The newlyweds spent their first night in secret. However, after this, the man did not move in with his wife but continued to live in the military barracks, meeting his spouse only occasionally when circumstances allowed. And this was far from the most surprising aspect of their daily life. If a man had difficulty procreating, the Spartan state actively encouraged the practice of surrogate fatherhood. A woman could conceive a child with another man, most often a strong and renowned warrior, and this occurred with the full approval of her lawful husband. Such an approach was perceived in society as a completely natural and effective way to strengthen the community. The main goal of all marriages in Sparta was the birth of strong and healthy children capable of becoming full citizens and brave warriors in the future. The state exercised strict control over this sphere of life, striving to prevent the degeneration of society. But as history showed, these measures did not help to halt the decline. Among other things, Sparta enforced a strict prohibition on luxury. Wearing jewelry, using silver, gold, or exquisite clothing was not permitted. All citizens were equal in their modest appearance. Even the monetary system was unique. Spartan money consisted of metal rods, which made accumulation extremely difficult and storage and transport highly impractical. Spartans believed that luxury posed a threat to their moral principles and reduced military effectiveness, which, incidentally, made foreign trade with Sparta virtually impossible, as the metal rods had no value outside the polis. However, to everyone's surprise, this also had undeniable advantages. Spartans were completely incorruptible. When the Persians, attempting to win them over, offered the Spartans gold, they proudly replied that their true strength lay not in wealth but in unyielding valor. Even funeral rites in Sparta were characterized by extreme simplicity. The use of expensive gravestones and elaborate ceremonies was strictly forbidden, so that death would not become an occasion for the display of material wealth. However, Sparta gained particular renown thanks to the legendary battle against Persian forces, which occurred in 480 BC, and later formed the basis of the acclaimed film, 300 Spartans. The Persian king Xerxes pursued the ambitious goal of conquering Greece and incorporating its vast territories into his expanding empire. He assembled a formidable army, whose numbers, according to ancient sources, reached 2 million people, though modern historians tend to estimate it at between 200,000 and 300,000 warriors. Facing the immediate threat of invasion, the Greek city-states formed a temporary defensive alliance, which included Athens, Sparta, and many other city-states. A strategic decision was made to hold back the Persian advance in the narrow mountain pass at Thermopylae, which offered a unique chance to nullify the enemy's colossal numerical superiority. Thermopylae, whose name translates to hot dates, is a cramped mountain corridor in central Greece, located between the coastline and the slopes of Mount Kallidromo. The width of this pass in certain places did not exceed a few meters, which effectively prevented the Persians from leveraging their overwhelming numbers. Such a geographical position made this an ideal defensive position for a small, yet resolute force. At the heart of this legendary confrontation stood a valiant detachment of 300 Spartans, led by their king, Leonidas. They were supported by approximately 7,000 warriors from allied city-states, among whom the Thebans, Phocians, and Thespians stood out, united by a common purpose. On the opposite side, the mighty Persian army spread out, a conglomerate of numerous ethnic groups that included the elite, immortals, selected, highly skilled warriors. Parallel to the ground actions, the Persian fleet made desperate attempts to break through the narrow waters of the Straits of Artemisium. However, the course of events was altered by a local resident named Ephialtes. It was he who showed the Persian commanders a secret, flanking path through the mountains. Taking advantage of this information, the Persians immediately sent a portion of their numerous troops along the indicated route, aiming to execute a surprise flanking maneuver and attack the Greek army from the rear. Recognizing the inevitability of defeat in the unfolding situation, King Leonidas made the difficult but strategically sound decision to dismiss most of his allies. Only 300 Spartans, whose loyalty was unwavering, remained with him, along with 700 brave Thespians and 400 Thebans. In this final, desperate battle, the Greek warriors fought with unparalleled courage to the very end, demonstrating an unyielding will to resist. King Leonidas fell bravely, and the remnants of his valiant force were surrounded and completely annihilated by the superior enemy forces. And although the Greeks suffered a tactical defeat in this battle, their heroic resistance and incredible steadfastness significantly slowed the Persian advance. This invaluable time allowed other Greek city-states to prepare their defenses, fortify their positions, and organize further resistance. The Spartans, in turn, demonstrated to the world for centuries the ideal of resilience, self-sacrifice, and unwavering courage, thereby definitively solidifying their reputation as some of the greatest and most valiant warriors of ancient Greece. Sparta was consistently distinguished by its limited demographic potential, especially compared to flourishing Athens. This was due to a unique principle of citizenship. In Sparta, only Spartiates, men who had mastered the rigors of the harsh military training system known as the agoge, were recognized as full citizens. Furthermore, constant involvement in frequent military conflicts significantly reduced the male population. As for newborn boys, they were inspected by elders, and weak or sickly infants were categorically rejected from the Spartan training system. There is a belief that they were condemned to die somewhere on a mountain, but modern historians are convinced that this is merely an artistic exaggeration. Sparta strictly regulated the admission of new members into its ranks. In sharp contrast to Athens, where slaves or foreigners were sometimes granted civil rights, Sparta remained a closed community. To offset the imbalance caused by the limited number of Spartiates, two other numerous groups of inhabitants existed in society. One of these was the Helots, semi-free inhabitants whose primary occupation was agriculture. They supplied the Spartans with necessary provisions but were themselves deprived of any civil privileges. The Helots outnumbered the Spartiates many times over, and their continuous oppression necessitated constant surveillance and systematic punitive measures. A special place in the social hierarchy was occupied by the second category of the population, the perioikal. These free people inhabited the lands of Laconia, part of the Spartan state, but were deprived of full citizen rights. Their main occupation was craft production and active trade, making them an important element of the economy. Additionally, the perioika often participated in military campaigns, performing auxiliary or secondary roles in the Spartan army. Although they numerically outnumbered the full Spartiates, the perioika never possessed enough power or influence to change the existing state of affairs, known as the status quo. The history of Sparta, this unique polis, began in the 11th century BCE when it formed as a powerful city-state. Its existence continued for many centuries, until the 2nd century BC when all of Greece came under the rule of the Roman Empire. Paradoxically, Sparta's power was undermined not by external enemies, but by internal difficulties. Its collapse was due to a complex set of factors: a growing demographic crisis, deep economic problems, an inflexible social structure, the gradual decline of its once invincible military might, and the inability of its cultural and social institutions to adapt to a changing world. Although the Spartans were rightly considered the unparalleled warriors of their time, Sparta itself did not represent an ideal society. Its demise was a result of self-destruction.